Well, it's official. Tony, I want my life back Hayward is out as BP CEO. Here's a word on Tony Hayward's legacy from Bob Dudley, the guy who's set to replace him as of October 1st.
I have great admiration for Tony. His commitment to the corporate response in the United States and around the Gulf was evident from the very beginning. When you talk to Tony, he says, look, I was the captain of the ship when a terrible accident happened.
Well, that's one way to look at it. Another way is that Tony Hayward was the captain of a ship that routinely and systematically ignored safety concerns and as a result exploded, sank to the bottom of the ocean and pumped millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, threatening a quarter of America's wetlands, not to mention the Gulf region's economic stability. But, you know, tomato, tomato. What's not in dispute is the result of Tony Hayward's metaphorical ship captaining. As a reward for his, leadership, let's say, during this really stellar moment in BP's corporate history, Tony Hayward is getting a severance package plus pension payments that amount to an estimated $18 million. That's what he gets for presiding over a massive oil disaster and record losses. But the Wall Street Journal has compiled a list of the best paid CEOs of the decade, and Tony Hayward's $18 million payout is an absolute pittance compared to the kind of cash top CEOs are raking in. Larry Ellison, the founder and CEO of Oracle, tops the list with more than $1.8 billion, billion with a B. Barry Diller of IAC and Expedia.com made $1.4 billion. Ray Irani of Occidental Petroleum made $857 million. And Steve Jobs of Apple made $749 million. Richard Fairbanks, CEO of Capital One, made off with $569 million. Okay, so CEOs, in other words, make an astonishing amount of money. And, right, we know that. And we've learned anything from our friend Tony Hayward. It's not that just because they're all really great at their jobs and they're totally worth it to the company they work for. CEO pay is not, in fact, a meritocracy. It is the result of the very cozy relationship between CEOs and the people who decide how much CEOs should get paid. Here's how it works in a nutshell. The board of directors has to determine how much to pay their CEO. But it just so happens that most of the people on the board of directors are really good buddies with the CEO in question. So naturally, they'll want to cut their pal a good deal. And there are lots and lots of ways to do that. For example, the New York Times is reporting this week on a study showing that boards of directors, quote, routinely use compensation peer groups to artificially inflate pay for their chief executives. So they pick out other overpaid CEOs and they use them as examples of why they need to overpay their CEO. Neat system, huh? This whole system would be more frustrating than infuriating if it weren't for the fact that CEO pay is both a cause and partly a symptom of the staggering increase of inequality in this country. I want you to take a look at this. This is how much better the poorest people in America are doing now compared to 1979. This is adjusted for inflation, it's income. Okay, look at that. If you're in the bottom fifth of the income bracket, you're making only 16% more today than you would have in 1979. If you're in the middle of the income bracket, you're making 25% more now. But the top fifth of earners in this country, they're making 95% more now than they would have in 1979. And that's not the really shocking part of this graph. Check this out. This is how much better the top 1% of Americans are doing now. The income of the very richest among us has shot up by 281% since 1979. The inequality represented in that graph doesn't just mean the rich are doing well and the poor are doing badly. It means there's a social pyramid in this country, and as you climb it, you encounter a smaller and smaller group of people doing better and better, while everyone at the bottom stays where they are. And it's precisely this kind of systematic inequality that incentivized the corporate fraud of the last decade, from Enron to Countrywide. It helped drag the economy into near collapse, and it's creating an environment in which a select group of people are able to completely immunize themselves against the fate of the rest of the society. And what that means in practical terms is that evidence of the economic collapse and the too slow recovery is in full display in cities that I've been visiting, in Detroit and New Orleans and Des Moines, but it's not at all evident on Wall Street. Something needs to be done to change that. We can all celebrate the passage of financial reform, or what's passing for financial reform, for giving shareholders more say on how much CEOs are paid. But the problem is more fundamental and more pervasive than that, because the problem isn't just CEO pay. It's that our entire social and economic way of life in this country is broken and unfair and inequitable. And we need to figure out a way to repair it. Want to know what might be a good way to start? Well, remember how George W. Bush massively cut taxes for the richest people in America? That tax cut, the one designed to benefit the very wealthiest people in this country who are already doing so well, is due to expire in January. We could let it. That would be a first step in the right direction. What remains to be seen is whether the Democrats in Congress have the political will to take that step.